My ex-girlfriend is there. I have to go pick her up. My husband exclaimed as he stared at a woman as if he were being drawn to her. I was stunned and speechless at his sudden outburst. This incident happened while we were on our way to the wedding venue in a car on our wedding day. He slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a stop, and seemed to be observing the situation for a while. The woman my husband was looking at was carrying a heavy load. Then, all of a sudden, he started panicking and said to me, "You're in the way. Get out of the car quickly." My name is Emily. I am a 29-year-old nurse. I met my husband, Steve, when we were introduced by a mutual friend, and we are the same age. I've been so busy with my job that I barely have time for dating. However, I do think about getting married if I find the right person, I once confided in a friend. To which she replied, "I know just the right guy for you. I'll introduce you to." She went out of her way to set up a meeting for us. At that time, I was working full throttle as a nurse. I was hoping to find a man who could support and stand beside me in my career. Steve turned out to be exactly the kind of man I had hoped for. He took great pride in his work and had this confident, dedicated approach towards everything. I rarely had conversations outside of work, especially with men. Although I was nervous, Steve showed understanding and concern by saying, "Nursing must be really challenging, especially nowadays. I think healthcare professionals face both mental and physical challenges." I felt deeply comforted by his words. I responded, "Yes, it is challenging. But seeing you, Steve, makes me feel like I need to step up my game." He looked a little embarrassed when I said that. I was attracted to Steve's easygoing nature. He wasn't just all seriousness. Things progressed smoothly between us, and we decided to get married. I felt we could go through life supporting and understanding each other without changing our lifestyles. I loved my job, so even after getting married, it felt natural for me to continue working. However, one day, Steve approached me with a rather stern look on his face. "We need to talk," he began. Concerned I might have done something wrong, I started to replay recent events in my mind. Then, out of the blue, he said, "Can you quit your job?" Shocked, I replied, "Why? I love my job. Have I done something that bothers you?" He responded in a commanding tone, "Do you know how it looks when my wife works harder than me? From now on, you quit your job and focus entirely on the household chores, and I'll provide for us. Got it?" Frankly, I was taken aback. I had never seen this side of Steve before. I argued, "If you wanted a stay-at-home wife, you should have mentioned it before we got married." Steve mumbled, "I've never met someone so dedicated to their job. I thought if we got married, you'd handle household chores perfectly. I'm not good at it." Frustrated, I snapped, "Why not hire a housekeeper? Or are you just looking for a free perfect maid?" He replied, "Don't be silly. If I didn't enjoy being with you, I wouldn't have married you in the first place." Despite my reservations, considering our newlywed status and my feelings for Steve, I thought maybe I should try harder. After some thought, I said, "If that's your concern, I'll try to do better with the household chores. But I don't plan to quit my job. At least wait until your salary alone can support the two of us." Regardless, I continued working. My husband, seemingly very angry, not only refused to do household chores but also started to constantly monitor everything I did. Naturally, my burden just kept increasing. There were days when I had to cut corners on the housework while juggling my job. He would point out even the smallest things I might have missed in the chores. One day, fed up, I told him, "I get it, you're not into household chores. But it'd be great if you could help a little since we're both working." Steve sighed and responded, "How many times do I have to tell you I'm not good at it? You're the one finding it hard to balance work and home. Why not just quit your job?" I shot back, "When will you get it? We can't survive on your salary alone." Even when I talk back to him, it's like talking to a brick wall. As soon as the conversation turns to his earnings, he quickly changes the subject. One day he remarked, "You know, Amanda was perfect at these chores. I'm surprised there's such a difference between two women. If you can't handle housework, then as a woman, you're failing." I did marry you, after all, so be grateful. Amanda refers to the girlfriend my husband was dating before he met me. Even though we are married, I couldn't help but feel angry at being compared to his ex-girlfriend. Yet, I couldn't deny that there was some truth in what he said. While I'm reasonably trusted at work, I lack allure as a woman. I was aware that it wasn't just because I am a married woman. I knew I lacked femininity. I understood that, but being told so by my husband made me want to prove him wrong. However, the reality is that we couldn't live on my husband's income alone. So, I continued to work as usual, but made an effort to handle household chores more efficiently. My husband was always on the lookout for any chores I might have missed, but he eventually had nothing to complain about since I did everything perfectly. That's how peace finally came to our home. After a while, we had a dinner planned with both our parents. My mother asked about our wedding, and I happily shared my dream. I've been wanting to have a ceremony for a while now, and I've saved up a bit for it. I want to make it a glamorous event that everyone can enjoy. My proposal was met with enthusiastic agreement from my mother and mother-in-law, but Steve quickly dismissed my idea, saying, "Do we really need to go all out? Guests aren't really interested in our wedding, they just feel obligated to come and bring money. If they don't come, they worry they'll seem unsympathetic or bad at maintaining relationships. They just come because they feel they have to. Besides, nobody really cares about other people's happiness. Are you sure you're not just influenced by too many dramas?" And he laughed. I had never felt the way Steve described at friends' weddings, and I thought to myself that people like that just shouldn't come. I couldn't help but get angry. Steve went on, "If you have that much saved up, I wish you'd share some of it with me as a reward for my hard work. I want a motorcycle. Let's skip the wedding and honeymoon expenses and use that money for my motorcycle." And then he unilaterally proceeded to plan for a cheap wedding and honeymoon to save money for his motorcycle. When I looked at my parents, their faces were tense. They seemed to be holding back their true feelings. Before I could sort out my feelings, my in-laws spoke up. "Steve, that's enough. You can't just dismiss Emily's wishes and only think about yourself. How can you even think about using the money she saved for our wedding on a motorcycle just for yourself?" My mother-in-law scolded him. My father-in-law added, "People have different views about weddings, so it's inevitable that you and Emily would feel differently. But, you can't just outright deny her opinion, insult her, and then try to take her money. Do you realize how petty you're acting right now? If you continue like this, she might divorce you before you even get married." I told Steve, "I've never once felt unimpressed or uninterested at any wedding I've attended. When I see a bride looking happy, I can't help but tear up. It's a moment when I can really feel that the groom cherishes his wife, and I even thank them for inviting me to their ceremony. I have friends who've planned events at their weddings to entertain the guests, and it was really fun. But I guess you think differently, and that's okay. How about we try to save on the wedding and put that money towards a better honeymoon?" I was glad that my in-laws scolded him, but no matter how much others tried to get through to him, it was meaningless if Steve himself wasn't willing to change. I had just decided to compromise and have the wedding ceremony according to my husband's wishes when he suddenly exclaimed, "No, forget it. I'm gonna make all your dreams come true. Look, the weddings we've attended must have been pretty great, right? So let's make ours even better," he said, suddenly becoming very serious. My husband doesn't like being compared to others. He had even been warned by his parents that if things continued this way, we might end up divorcing, which seemed to have finally made him reflect on his behavior. Seeing this, his parents also seemed relieved and advised us, "We know you're both busy, but please, try to talk things over together as much as possible. It's not good to just push through one person's opinion, but it's also not okay to stay silent and not express your feelings just because the other person isn't listening. Make sure to really share your thoughts with each other." Looking at my husband's changed attitude, my mother-in-law, as if to say this is the way to go, Steve, cheerfully started to suggest, "Steve, that's the spirit. I knew you'd understand if we just talked about it. Look, Emily, how about this adorable dress? It would suit you so well," as she showed me a magazine. "Emily, don't hesitate to speak up. If money becomes an issue, we'll figure it out together, she even offered. I felt it was too much to accept such a generous offer, so I explained that we would plan within our budget, but it was clear that my in-laws were really looking forward to the ceremony, which made me happy. Since we started dating, my in-laws had treated me like their own daughter. And Emily, if Steve ever treats you badly, you tell us right away, okay? They continued to assure me. From that point on, we were able to proceed smoothly with the wedding preparations. My husband was determined, saying, "We're gonna have a wedding like no one has ever seen before." He started researching voraciously, reading books and browsing the internet for ideas. He began suggesting ideas more proactively than I did. Watching him look at other people's weddings and smiling naturally, saying this looks nice, made me feel that the joy of the wedding was really getting through to him, and I felt reassured. We both love diving deep into things once we decide to do them. And during our meetings with the wedding planner, the days flew by. It was a busy time, but our discussions were peaceful, and I found those days enjoyable. Finally, the day of the wedding arrived. It was a sweltering summer day, but the weather was clear, so I felt relieved that the ceremony would go off without a hitch. My husband was also in high spirits, and we both got up early, ready to go. We were on our way to the venue with him driving. If he just drove normally, we would arrive in plenty of time for the ceremony. I was feeling excited, but then suddenly, my husband slammed on the brakes. What? What happened? I asked in a panic. There wasn't any apparent danger, and I didn't understand why he had stopped so abruptly. He then said, "Let's just pull over here for a sec, and move the car to the side of the road." Suddenly, he exclaimed, "That's it. Amanda's there," and started staring at a woman walking on the sidewalk. His outburst took me by surprise, and I was left in shock. It seemed like Amanda was carrying something heavy, as she occasionally stopped to take a break. From my husband's reaction, I thought he might be considering helping her because she seemed to be struggling. I had mixed feelings watching him stare at her, but when he started driving again, I felt a sense of relief. Honestly, I had been worried that maybe he still had feelings for his ex-girlfriend, as he used to compare me to her and complain about things I did wrong. I was concerned that this might affect our wedding day, but thankfully, that wasn't the case. However, after a few turns, when Amanda was out of sight, my husband pulled over again and looked at me with a smile. "Get out of the car, you're in the way." Suddenly, my mind went blank. What? Why? She didn't even ask for a ride. Why are you telling me to get out? Today is our wedding day, isn't it? I asked, and my husband responded, "She's got so much stuff, it's gonna be a hassle. Just do as I say." He then forcefully pulled my arm and dragged me out of the car. "Don't follow me." "Absolutely not," he said and drove off alone. After that, I was so shocked that I couldn't think of anything and just stood there, frozen. I knew I couldn't catch up to the car now, and I couldn't contact anyone since my wallet and cell phone were still inside the car. Gradually, anger started to boil inside me, realizing he might not even want to get married, but I knew I had to contact the venue anyway to avoid causing any trouble, so I started walking there alone. Even if Steve didn't show up, I thought his parents might help me if I explained that all my valuables were still in the car. With that in mind, I quickly reached the venue. Luckily, I had left home early, and the distance wasn't too great, so I managed to arrive on time. However, honestly, I was exhausted from walking under the scorching sun without even a parasol. As I entered the building, intending to take a break, there was my husband, looking utterly dejected. I understood that he, traveling by car, would arrive before me, walking. But why was he here when he was supposed to meet Amanda? As I was wondering about this, my mother-in-law, who seemed to have noticed me, rushed over in a panic. "Emily. My stupid son, I'm really sorry about him. It was hot outside, wasn't it? Are you okay? Here, drink this," she said, handing me a bottle of water. After thanking her and taking the water, I asked my husband, "Hey, what happened to Amanda?" He bluntly responded, "Oh, she said she didn't need help and ran off. Some guy I didn't know protected her and took her away. So, I had no choice but to come here." He looked as if his mind was somewhere else. Noticing my suspicion, my in-laws harshly reprimanded him, saying things like, "We told you this before, but we can't believe you'd abandon your bride on your wedding day to talk to an ex-girlfriend. What were you thinking? We know you might not be forgiven, but you better apologize sincerely." My husband was completely disheartened. Then, my mother-in-law sadly shared, "Actually, we were too excited and came here way before you two were supposed to arrive. But when only Steve showed up, we grilled him, asking where is Emily, and that's when we understood the situation. I then asked my husband, after Amanda turned you down, why didn't you come back for me? He explained, she got really mad, called me a good-for-nothing, and I just lost all my will to do anything. I figured you'd eventually come to the venue, so I thought I'd just wait for you here." Looking closely, I could see his cheek was red and swollen, which I later found out was because his father couldn't hold back and had punched him. Neither of us could shift our mood towards the wedding now, and just then, Amanda arrived. Next to her was an unfamiliar man, whom she introduced as her husband. Amanda's husband glared at Steve. "So, you tried to forcefully get a clearly unwilling woman into your car, but ran away the moment you saw another man's face?" I heard everything from Amanda. "You've been stalking her even after breaking up, right? And today, on the day of your own wedding, you leave your bride and hit on your ex? That's just low," he exclaimed angrily. After giving Steve a scornful look, Amanda turned to me and said, "We did date, that's true. But we've broken up, and I have no interest in him anymore. I never imagined he'd leave his bride on their wedding day to come talk to me. I'm really sorry." I hurriedly stopped her as she apologized with a gloomy expression.
"No way! No matter how you look at it, this person is the one at fault. Please, don't apologize."
At the sound of my voice, Amanda seemed relieved and took a deep breath. Then, as her husband lost his target for his anger, he glared at me and started to cry.
"If you had just stopped me more, none of this would have happened. Don't you feel any pain in your heart seeing me being blamed like this?"
As I was about to retort, dumbfounded, that it serves him right, Amanda and her husband started berating mine. Amanda angrily said, "Enough is enough. I kept quiet before because I was the only one being troubled, but now you've gone and bothered my precious husband, and I won't forgive you for that. You're not getting away with this for free." She glared at my husband as she spoke. Her husband also glared at mine with a look of disdain, saying, "Who do you think you are? You've hurt both your own wife and someone else's, and now you're playing the victim?" I then asked Amanda, "Neither you nor your husband did anything wrong. In fact, I should be the one apologizing for all the trouble caused by my husband. From what he said, am I right in assuming that he has been asking you to get back together with him?" After a deep sigh, Amanda nodded vigorously. "Actually, we live quite close to Steve's parents' house. He's ambushed me pretending it was a coincidence several times before, demanding that we get back together. I've been clear but gentle in my refusals. He has a temper and is quick to violence, so I kept it a secret from my husband. But after today, I think I should have told him sooner," she said, her expression on the verge of tears. Her husband added, "I understand why my wife couldn't talk about it before. Seeing how unreasonable this man is, who knows what he might have done if we had just outright denied him. I don't intend to blame my wife." Seeing such a caring couple, I felt that, though they were complete strangers, Amanda was indeed lucky to have married a good man. I apologized to Amanda, "I'm so sorry for causing you trouble. When he said he was busy with work late into the night, he was actually going to your place, wasn't he? I'm really, really sorry." Then, turning to my still unsatisfied-looking husband, I scolded, "You need to apologize too. You've caused trouble for so many people, what are you going to do about it?" He only frowned in response. But Amanda's husband, losing his patience, interrupted.
"An apology would be fine. With that look on his face, I doubt he's truly remorseful anyway. In any case, I don't want anything to do with you. Promise me you'll never approach my wife again,"
he yelled, and my husband, face red, stepped forward towards him.
"I was with Amanda before she met you. That means I understand her better than you do. I want to get back together with her. If you're lonely being divorced and single, I'm willing to swap wives with you. Let's do that. My wife is a hard worker, so she's got money.
My husband declared, as if it were a brilliant idea. At his complete lack of understanding, not just I, but also Amanda and her husband were left speechless. Watching him excitedly talk about the day we'd get divorced and the day he'd register his marriage with Amanda, I made up my mind. Anyway, let's call off the wedding. I told my husband just that, and I apologized to my in-laws.
I'm sorry. I know you were all looking forward to today, but as you can see, I cannot marry your son. I'm grateful for all you've done for me until now, but I'm sorry it had to come to this.
With that, my in-laws, tearfully, apologized. Emily, you've done nothing wrong, and we think you're making the right choice. Our son is really an idiot. We're sorry for all the trouble he's caused. Looking around calmly, I noticed numerous venue staff members watching us. The time was such that relatives and friends were due to arrive soon. Feeling it would be rude to cancel at this late stage, I spoke to the staff and decided to change the event from a wedding to a dinner party, and made it clear we wouldn't be accepting any gifts. The venue staff, accustomed to such dramas, gave my husband disapproving looks but efficiently arranged the dinner party, leaving me feeling extremely grateful. My husband, oblivious to everything else, kept dreaming about his new life with Amanda, happily planning out loud what they would do together. Even in the face of their disgusted looks. Seeing his attitude, I was just dumbfounded. Having finished my explanation, I returned to my husband and told him on the spot that I agreed to a divorce. I knew this already, but my husband didn't seem the least bit sad. He accepted it with great joy. Just at that moment, the attendees started to gather one after another. My parents, in-laws, and I had no choice but to keep apologizing to the attendees, encouraging them to at least enjoy the meal, even though we were making a painful excuse. I had no intention whatsoever of telling the guests this ridiculous story, but my husband was happily announcing to everyone that the wedding was cancelled and that he was divorcing me. People who arrived on time were in an uproar over the sudden cancellation of the wedding. Moreover, even when confronted by the guests, my husband kept a calm face and continued to spout his wild fantasies, saying things like he had found his true love and was going to marry the person he truly loved.
Amanda, this guy is just beyond reason at this point. Please, take your husband and get out of here now.
Gently pulling Amanda's arm, I handed her over to a staff member, and the two of them quickly left through the back exit. Just when I thought things might finally settle down, my husband, who realized she was gone, flew into a rage. Seeing the two of them walking away outside the window, he hurriedly started chasing after them.
Amanda! Wait, come back home with me, not with that guy. Enough is enough, what the hell is wrong with you? Stay away from Amanda, just disappear.
As he ran out of the venue, Amanda's husband easily stopped him. Then, my father and father-in-law, who had followed behind, grabbed him and dragged him back inside the venue. I followed them, bowing my head numerous times, apologizing to Amanda and her husband as they left. The attendees, who had witnessed the whole ordeal from inside, were utterly dismayed, leaving the venue while tossing remarks like that was just low at my husband. In the end, the place was almost empty. I felt sorry, but there was also a part of me that felt it couldn't be helped since my husband's rampage couldn't be stopped. In the end, only my friends, my parents, and my in-laws stayed. They all expressed their concern for me, helping me regain some composure. With the mood still heavy, I finished cleaning up. Just then, my husband, saying cleaning's done, we're good now, right? So, I'm gonna go to Amanda's house, tried to leave the venue. My crying in-laws forcefully put him in the car and took him home. A few days later, with my in-laws present, I got my husband to sign the divorce papers, and we were officially divorced. I either had his stuff picked up by my in-laws or sent to him via mail. It was a hectic few days, but it finally came to an end. One day, I decided to take a trip to a suburban town for a change of pace. While at a shopping mall, I unexpectedly ran into Amanda and her husband. Worried about how they had been since our last encounter, I asked about their well-being, and they shared their story. Apparently, my ex-husband had not changed his ways. He had been stalking Amanda, waiting at places she visited, and even going as far as following her to her home and workplace. He had been insisting, "We're still in love, right? You were just playing hard to get that time, weren't you?" Talking only about what suited him and constantly asking to get back together. Finally, Amanda consulted the police and began the process of filing a complaint against him. Believing he had done nothing wrong, my ex-husband continued his delusional talk in front of the police, which led to him being deemed a dangerous individual. Appropriate measures were promptly taken, and a restraining order was issued against him, preventing him from approaching Amanda. Surprisingly, the moment the restraining order was issued, my ex-husband lost his momentum. It was only after legal measures were taken that he finally realized Amanda truly despised him. Since then, he stopped approaching Amanda and her surroundings. Though I no longer cared about him, as long as he wasn't causing any more trouble for Amanda and her husband, I felt that was for the best. Amanda continued, "Actually, we are moving soon, close to my husband's hometown. We came here today to buy some cleaning supplies for the move. Emily, please take care of yourself." As I repeatedly apologized and saw them off, the two of them left with smiles on their faces. Watching their backs as they left, I silently wished for their happiness from the shadows. That settles that. Just as I was thinking of deleting my ex-husband's contact information, I couldn't believe it, he called. I had kept his number just in case there were issues with dividing our assets, but I never imagined he'd actually call. I really didn't want to answer, but I had just met with Amanda and her husband. Somewhat worried, I answered, and my ex-husband started talking. "Can we just pretend the divorce didn't happen? I tried living alone, and I realized how important you are to me. Hey, can we give it another shot and live together, helping each other out?" I took a good dozen seconds to process what he was saying, and then I responded as calmly as I could. "This has got to be a joke. We're strangers now. No matter what you say, I'm not interested in remarrying you. Please, don't ever contact me again." I hung up, set his number to block, and rejected his multiple incoming calls. He was making a fuss on the other end of the line until the very end, but I felt completely relieved, finally saying goodbye for good. He seemed to try calling from different numbers for a while, but I kept ignoring him, and once I got a new cell phone and changed my number, things finally became peaceful. I had moved out of our house, so there were no issues even if he tried something unexpected, and he had no way to contact me. Amanda and her husband had moved long ago, and even if he showed up at my parents' house, they'd be furious and send him away. Most importantly, after everything that happened at the wedding, my ex-in-laws decided to sell the house. This house is close to Amanda's parents. "We thought we might as well sell it now," they said, tears in their eyes. It was hard to see them like that, but I just hope they live happily and keep their distance from my ex-husband. Without a home to return to, he must be wandering around alone by now. He's isolated, with nobody knowing where he is, and rumors are spreading among his friends and workplace because of the scene he caused at the wedding. Especially according to a friend who works at the same company as him, it seems like he's become quite the outcast there. It's truly what he deserves. I hope he reflects on his actions from the bottom of his heart. As for me, I've started a new life from scratch in a new place. A new job opportunity at a hospital came up just in time, and I took it. I can balance work and household chores at my current job, which makes me very happy. I'm thrilled to be back in a meaningful job, learning new things every day in this new environment. I've also built good relationships with my colleagues, which makes my days fulfilling. Although I'm divorced, I'm undoubtedly happier now than when I was living with my ex-husband. It's made me realize once again just how much I love my job. All I hope for now is for these peaceful days to continue. Huh? You're pregnant? No way. You're not serious about having the baby, right? That was the first thing my husband said to me when I finally got pregnant at 40. Having a baby at your age, that kid's definitely gonna be defective. I can't deal with raising a child like that. With those words, he left me. 30 years later, I randomly bumped into my ex-husband on the streets. looking exactly the same.
Is that defective daughter of yours even alive? Well, even if she is, she's probably unemployed, right?
He could afford to spew such nonsense only for so long. Because my daughter turned out to be an admirable. My name is Catherine Smith. I'm turning 70 this year. Today, I'd like to share a story about how my dark past was cleansed. Back in my youth, I was what you'd call a career woman, working in a male-dominated company, competing with men in sales. Of course, there were those who resented me, but I didn't care and strove every day to be the top salesperson. Being tomboyish by nature and constantly competing with men, I didn't have many men approaching me, but that didn't bother me at all. Work was my everything. However, my parents were quite traditional and believed that a woman's happiness was in marriage, so they took me to matchmaking sessions time and again. At a party I was invited to by a colleague, I met Michael. He was planning to start a business and found my dedication to work impressive.
The future is for women to work hard too,
he said, acknowledging my dedication. At a time when it was still frowned upon for women to work so hard, it was probably inevitable that I was drawn to Michael, who accepted me for who I was. We continued to date smoothly and decided to get married. I was 30 and Michael was 28 at the time. I guess you could call me the older wife. After graduating from a prestigious university, my husband Michael landed a job at a renowned company. But he declared he had a dream. And with that, he quit to start his own venture. It was quite a gutsy move, especially since he didn't rely on the knowledge or technology from his previous job, but chose to start a business in an entirely different field. At that time, I had no knowledge of entrepreneurship. My only aim was to get a job and work my butt off. That's why, when Michael shared his firm resolution to start a business, I must admit I was taken aback by his masculinity and thought it was cool. When I'd come home after work, he'd tell me things like I tried this out today or this is my goal, and this is the issue at hand. I didn't quite grasp all of it, but I enjoyed listening to his work stories. Living a monotonous daily life and striving to excel at my job, I found Michael's tales exciting and appealing. Then, a few years passed. And one day my company held a family social event. It was a weekend gathering where employees and their families came together for a barbecue to deepen our connections. At this time, Michael's business wasn't doing so well, nearly at the brink of closure. Looking for a change of scenery, I invited Michael to the family social, and he was thrilled to join. But during the barbecue, a close office assistant approached me, asking if Michael was drunk, expressing concern. Michael can handle his liquor. And doesn't change much when he's drunk. What happened? I asked, puzzled. The assistant told me she was worried because she saw Michael arguing with Ms. Smith from accounting. Arguing with Ms. Smith? Concerned, I rushed over to Michael and heard him saying, "But it's the truth, isn't it?" I quickly pulled Michael away and apologized to Ms. Smith for the disturbance. Later, I went to Ms. Smith to get the full story, and it turned out Michael had said something offensive about factory workers, suggesting it must be tough. I apologized deeply to her and thankfully, she forgave us. However, this discriminatory remark by Michael wasn't entirely surprising. Yes. Michael always took pride in graduating from a prestigious university, landing a job at a renowned company, and even starting his own business. He had a tendency to look down on others based on education and background. As someone with limited dating experience, I did feel a bit off about his remarks, but also felt proud when he said that me being a woman did not stop me from graduating from a prestigious university and competing in the male-dominated workforce. Despite some issues, we were living happily as a couple. Yet, we had another worry. We were having trouble conceiving a child. At that point, I was still working hard and wasn't too stressed about it, thinking it was something we couldn't control. But as I reached my mid-30s, the situation felt more pressing. Even so, I thought that if worst came to worst and we couldn't have kids, living a peaceful life just the two of us wouldn't be so bad. However, Michael seemed to have a different view. He began to express frustration about not having children yet.
It's embarrassing that we don't have kids at this age. Everyone around us has at least two. It's inconceivable that I'm the only one without any.
That remark was what was truly inconceivable. In my mind, I retorted. It seemed Michael had a clear life plan. Marry a woman with superior genes in his 20s. Have 2 kids by his early 30s. He says this is the path that successful people take. A plan I had never heard of. But Michael seemed to live by it. In my 20s, I met and married Michael, who deemed me to possess superior genes. The plan was progressing smoothly until it hit an unforeseen snag. I was supposed to have borne 2 children by now, yet conceiving had become a challenge. This displeased Michael. His frustration started to show, and he bluntly criticized me. You're academically successful and career-oriented, but it seems you lack maternal aptitude. Moreover, he accused me, your alma mater might be renowned, but as a woman, you're flawed. I've been duped. When I broached the subject of fertility treatments, Michael rejected the idea, stating, children born through fertility treatments can't possibly be superior. I'm totally against it. What a biased opinion. No matter how I tried to persuade him, even suggesting a simple hospital visit, he'd say things like, going to the hospital for such a thing would be an embarrassment. When I tentatively proposed at least getting tested, he exploded, what, you're saying it's my fault? Cut it out. He yelled and insisted, if you really want to go that badly, go by yourself. But going alone seemed pointless. Fertility treatments are a couple's endeavor. Yet, Michael failed to understand this. Nonetheless, I visited the fertility clinic alone, where the doctor told me, everything seems fine. Please come back with your husband next time. That was to be expected. After all, a child isn't made alone. Yet, without Michael's cooperation, it seemed I had no choice but to give up. That's what I thought. A decade into our marriage, I began to see Michael's so-called masculinity as nothing more than selfishness. His enthusiasm for starting a business had faded into a cycle of starting and giving up, and now, 10 years later, nothing had changed. While he did odd jobs occasionally, my salary was the mainstay of our finances. Yet, he would conveniently ignore any inconvenient truths. How many times had the thought of divorce crossed my mind? But after 10 years, affection takes root. Occasionally he was harsh, but if I didn't dwell on it, it didn't bother me. Humans are peculiar in that way. And then, on one fateful day as I turned 40, something astonishing happened. I was pregnant. My period had stopped. Had I reached menopause already? But at 40, wasn't that too soon? Worried it might be an illness, I decided to visit the hospital. The doctor's words left me stunned. You're pregnant. But I'm 40 years old. Pregnant? I replied in disbelief. The doctor reassured me, it's not uncommon for women at 40 to conceive. Though it was surprising. The doctor continued. There are risks compared to younger mothers, and there are precautions you'll need to take, but many have healthy babies. Encouraged by the doctor's words, I was elated at the prospect of having a child. Surely Michael would share in my joy. Full of excitement, I reported the news to Michael. However, his response was utterly unexpected. What? You're pregnant? That's gotta be a joke. You're not seriously considering keeping it, are you? Michael's unexpected words left me speechless and dumbfounded. But without a hint of concern for how I felt, he continued. Having a baby at your age, that child is definitely going to have issues. Raising a kid like that is just something I can't handle. If you insist on going through with this, then it's divorce time. That's what he said to me. It felt like a hammer blow to the head. This was the child I had longed for. Not having it was not an option for me. Yet Michael was saying if I went through with it, we would get divorced. It turned out that to Michael, I was not someone to be loved, but merely a tool for producing superior children. Sure, after 10 years together, some affection had developed, but if I had to choose between Michael and my child, there wouldn't be a moment of hesitation. I'd choose my child. I could get by without Michael just fine. In fact, it would probably be harder for him than for me. With that in mind, I declared to Michael, I am absolutely having this child. The next day, he slapped the divorce papers in front of me. He was serious. But my decision was unwavering. We were going to divorce. As I filled out the divorce papers, Michael said to me, "From now on, stay out of my life." So that's how it would be until the end. What were those 10 years for, I wondered. But I too had no desire to have anything more to do with such a man. I gave up any claim to alimony and child support and decided to go back to my parents' house. I was anxious about whether I could continue working in sales while pregnant, but the company appreciated my years of hard work and asked me instead to train my junior colleagues internally until my maternity leave, which I was grateful for. Michael had been cruel, but I was surrounded by understanding people who encouraged me, and I gave birth to a healthy girl, Mindy. Despite the worries of a child born to an older mother, Mindy grew up well-nourished. With love from me and my parents, becoming a thoughtful, beautiful, and kind girl. Raised freely, she became a curious and lively child. Fast forward 30 years. I'm now 70. And Mindy is 30. An independent and successful adult. I've lived happily without a single thought of Michael. Then, one day, I was stopped by a familiar voice on the street. "Hey, is that you, Catherine?" "Michael?" Yes, it was that detestable Michael. "What's with you, looking all scruffy like that?" Michael approached with a sneer. "Just turned into an old lady, huh? I guess taking care of a kid with disabilities is tough, right?" He assumed Mindy was disabled, hurling the same old insults at me as before. "After our divorce, I remarried a woman 10 years younger. Looks really are everything with women. Turns out education didn't matter at all." Michael bragged, unasked, about his life post-divorce. "After our divorce, I remarried a woman 10 years younger. Looks really are everything with women. Turns out education didn't matter at all." Michael bragged, unasked, about his life post-divorce. "Got a daughter too, and unlike your disabled kid, mine's a beauty and pretty smart, too. She got the best of my brains and her mom's looks. What do you call it? Winning at life? We're out shopping together today. Dumping you was the best thing ever. Otherwise, I'd be stuck with you and that gloomy child of ours, can't imagine that. Oh man, I'm so glad." Sure has a way with words, doesn't he? There are plenty of things I'd like to say back. But arguing with such a person is a waste of time. Taking my silence as consent, Michael's chatter didn't stop. I wished he'd just go away if he was out shopping with his daughters. Just then, when I was thinking that, a woman in a deep hat and mask approached from behind. "Mom? What are you doing?" Yes. It was Mindy. "Do you know this person?" She asked about Michael. I hesitated, unsure how to respond. I hadn't gone into detail with Mindy about her father. I had always intended to explain it properly, but Mindy had always said there was no need to force the topic. And she had never met him. I was still contemplating what to say when Michael, grinning, said, "Oh, looks like you can go outside, huh? Must be really ugly under that mask." Now he was attacking Mindy. I wouldn't stand for Mindy being attacked. I was about to argue back when an unexpected person did it for me. "Hey! Where did you disappear all of a sudden? You're supposed to be carrying our bags." "Natalie." The voice belonged to Michael's daughter, apparently named Natalie. Michael had been proudly talking about his new family, but it seemed they only saw him as a porter. Hearing this, Mindy murmured, "Wow, to think that guy is my father." "What? Mindy, how did you?" I was shocked. She laughed and said, "When he's talking that loudly, it's hard not to hear." Then Natalie, who had overheard, pushed Michael aside and rushed to Mindy, asking, "Could you be Mindy? I'm a huge fan. Could I maybe get your autograph?" She was excited. Indeed. My daughter Mindy is an actress. Curious and eager, as a child, she held a flyer for a child actor audition, her eyes sparkling as she negotiated with me to apply. I thought she wouldn't get in, but let her apply anyway, and to my surprise, she was accepted. From there, Mindy worked hard and steadily, and, though I'm her parent, it's fair to say she's become a top-notch actress. And shockingly, Michael's daughter Natalie was a big fan of Mindy's. Watching all this, Michael flipped and started to brag, "Hey, Mindy's my daughter. She's doing great. I can brag about this." But then Natalie yelled at him, "You were just telling Mindy's mom how glad you were about the divorce, and calling Mindy defective. That's totally unacceptable. Even if Mindy and her mom forgive you, I will never forgive you for life." Sure enough, it seems even Michael couldn't say anything back to Natalie. After Natalie said that to him, he hurriedly came to apologize to us. But Michael's enemies only continued to grow. Michael's current wife, Christy, showed up and said, "You really need to start taking things seriously. Talking about starting a business but just drifting around aimlessly. I've put up with it because you do anything I ask, so I've held off on divorce, but seeing how you treat your ex-wife, it's just cruel. Looking down on others and attacking those who seem weaker than you, it's the lowest of the low. I can't be with someone after seeing their true nature. We're getting a divorce," she said nonchalantly. Caught off guard by the sudden declaration of divorce, Michael pleaded with Christy, "I'm really sorry. Please, anything but divorce." Despite his begging, both Christy and Natalie had had enough. Realizing pleading with them was useless, he turned to Mindy and said, "Please forgive my earlier rudeness. I'm terribly sorry. Could you please ask Christy to forgive me? I'm sure if you ask them, they'll listen to you. Help your dad out." It's amazing he could say such a thing after all that berating. Or rather, Mindy doesn't even consider this man her father. And why should she have to make such a request in the first place? As we stood there dumbfounded, Michael began to apologize, crying. "It was embarrassing and attracting attention, so please stop." Maybe sensing how we felt, Natalie told us, "I'm truly sorry for the trouble he's caused. I promise you, I won't let him claim to be Mindy's father. Go on, please leave. We'll handle this from here." Then, she secretly said to Mindy, "But I was really glad to meet you. I'll continue to support you." It seemed like Mindy was a good kid after all. We said goodbye to Christy and Natalie and left the place. Later on, I heard that Christy did go through with the divorce from Michael. He cried and threw a fit until the very end, not wanting a divorce, but how could anyone stay after seeing his true colors? In fact, I was almost impressed he'd managed to hide his true self from Christy and the others for so long. After the divorce was finalized, Michael was saddled with alimony, adding debt to his already incompetent life management, and he disappeared. I worried that rumors might spread about Mindy, but he was too down to cause any more trouble, thankfully. I know all this because Natalie apparently told Mindy via DM on social media. He turned out to be a terrible man, but it just goes to show, you reap what you sow. I will continue to fully support Mindy and live my life with gratitude to those around me. Now, the movie where Mindy is the lead is about to start. She's playing a lawyer who cuts down the evils of society. I'm looking forward to it. Hey. How long are you planning to keep ignoring me like this? Even though I've tried talking to her, my eldest son's wife continues to ignore me, not responding at all. This situation has been going on for about half a year now, and I've reached my limit of patience. I decided to have a family meeting with my eldest son involved. You know, if you don't want to talk to me, you don't have to force yourself to stay in this house. Is that so? Then, I'll gladly leave. Just when I thought she finally opened up, she responded with words I never expected. Gladly. Did she really not want to be with us that much? I was a bit shocked, but maybe this is for the best. If we forced ourselves to stay together, it would only make things more awkward. It's been half a year since the eldest son and his wife left our house. I've been living a quiet and peaceful life alone, but... Please help me! One day, out of the blue, my eldest son's wife came to my house. It seems like she's asking for help, but what on earth happened? What now? After leaving on your own, you have the nerve to come back and ask for help? That's what I was thinking. Actually. In the next moment, she started to tell an unbelievable story. My name is Madison. 10 years ago, I lost my beloved husband. He died of late-stage colon cancer, passing away just a month after the cancer was discovered.
Brandon, Daddy has passed away, but I'm going to do my best, okay?
As I spoke to my son Brandon, who is the eldest and was in his last year of middle school, through my tears, he cried with me.
Mom, you don't have to do everything. I will do what I can on my own.
At the time, Brandon, though just a middle school student, helped me a lot by taking care of household chores since I had to work part-time from morning till night to support our family after my husband's death. He never showed any sign of displeasure, always putting my needs before his own. I'm grateful that he has grown into such a kind-hearted person. Now, Brandon is 25 years old. Mom, there's someone I want you to meet. One day, Brandon solemnly said this to me. What? Are you getting married or something? As I asked this question, Brandon shyly nodded. Ah, has that time finally come? Knowing Brandon, his partner must be a kind-hearted person as well. And so, on the day my eldest son, Brandon, had decided, I was waiting at home when the doorbell rang. I glanced at the monitor with a bit of nervousness, and there stood a woman dressed quite flamboyantly. What? Is this the person he wants to marry? I let them into the house. Take a seat here. I'll make some tea for us, I said, directing them to the living room, thinking of offering some snacks. That's when it happened. Tea? Seriously? Do you have anything else? She said. What would you prefer? I have orange juice, if you'd like. I was honestly pissed off by her rude remark, but I held it in and asked her again. Orange juice? I'm not a child. Never mind, I don't want anything. I thought Brandon would scold her for her rudeness, but he just said, come on, now, and let it slide. Maybe she's just bad at communicating, I thought, and decided to introduce myself again. Nice to meet you. My name is Madison. Please take care of Brandon. My name is Katie. Oh, and just so you know, I have no intention of getting along with you. After saying that, my future daughter-in-law, Katie, just started playing with her phone and said nothing more. What's with this woman? I was so astounded, I went beyond anger. That's when Brandon suddenly said, Mom, I didn't tell you this before, but can we live here with you? To be honest, I was nervous about living with Katie, but I was happy that Brandon wanted to live with me. Oh, yeah, that's fine. I managed to say, accepting their proposal, not imagining that it would lead to such trouble later on. A month had passed since Brandon and his wife, Katie, started living with us, but she never opened her heart to me. On the contrary, she started pushing all the household chores onto me for various reasons. My back hurts today, so could you clean the house, please? I'm feeling weak today, could you cook for us? That was the daily routine. I never meant to force her to do housework. And to be honest, I was fine with doing the chores since it kept me busy. But I did wonder if she'd be alright when I'm gone one day. It's fine that I do the chores, but, are you sure you don't want to do anything? You might find it tough when the time comes. What? Why should I have to do anything for this house? I tried talking to her just once, but it had no effect. On the contrary, she just lashed out at me. Well, if she says so, it's fine. I guess. I stopped talking to her about it and just went on with my days. Half a year later. I'm going out to drink with a friend today, so I don't need dinner. Oh. Okay, have a good time, I replied. It was rare for Katie to go out, so that night, it was just me and Brandon for dinner. Hey. Was Katie always like that even when you were dating? Huh? What do you mean? I tried asking Brandon about his wife, but he seemed clueless. Come to think of it, I've never seen them have a pleasant conversation together. Curious, I decided to bluntly ask Brandon even though it might be none of my business. Are you two getting along okay? Katie is a housewife, right? I'm not trying to force her, but she doesn't do any housework and she's cold to me. I told him honestly about Katie, but she's not like that. Come on, thanks for the meal. My eldest son, even though he hadn't finished eating yet, hurriedly cleaned up his dishes and went back to his room. I'm sure he must have noticed the attitude of his wife, Katie. I felt like I was being abandoned by my son as well, and I was left alone at the dining table, feeling nothing but downhearted. While I was feeling depressed and lost in thought, I looked at the clock and realized it was nearly midnight. I should just go to bed now, I thought, and just at that moment, I heard the front door open. Ah. What a drink, what a drink. Katie, my eldest son's wife, came home humming a tune, seemingly in a very good mood from drinking, and went into the living room. I thought she might get a hangover if she went to bed like that. I poured a glass of water and handed it to Katie, saying, "Here, why don't you drink some water? You seem like you've had quite a bit to drink." But she ignored me and went to the kitchen to get water herself. Huh? Is she too drunk to realize I handed her water? I thought, but I had handed it right to her, so that couldn't be it. You want water, right? Well, here's some colder water, why don't you drink this? I tried speaking to her again, but once again, she ignored me and went to her room. What on earth is going on? I couldn't understand Katie's behavior at all. Well, maybe things will go back to normal tomorrow. That's what I thought, but the next morning, after seeing my eldest son, Brandon, off to work, I talked to Katie about last night. You drank quite a bit last night, didn't you? You didn't notice when I handed you water, and you went to the kitchen to pour yourself a glass. I was so surprised. I talked to Katie with a laugh, not meaning to be sarcastic at all, but she just glared at me and started fiddling with her cell phone. What is this? I don't understand at all. Even after that, I continued to speak to her, asking what do you want to eat today, and are you going anywhere with Brandon today, but she ignored everything. At this point, I'm out of options. I can't find a solution if I don't know the cause. I guess I just have to patiently wait until time solves this. But even after 2 months, Katie continued to ignore me. Why do I have to be ignored like this? I can't take it anymore. One evening after dinner, I asked my eldest son and his wife to stay in the living room, and I initiated a family meeting. I have something to talk about regarding Katie. I've been ignored by her for about 2 months now. Huh? Mom, is that true? Surely, she hasn't been ignoring you for 2 months. Right, Katie? My eldest son's reaction was normal, I think. It's natural for him not to think there's no communication since we live together. But the fact is, I have been continuously ignored. When both my son and I looked at Katie, she sighed and started talking. What do you want me to say? Without any sign of remorse, Katie openly admitted that she had been ignoring me. First of all, I decided to move into this house because Brandon said he didn't want to leave his mom alone. I just went along with it. Besides, I told you, didn't I? I have no intention of getting along with you. The other day, when I was drinking with my friends, they told me if I don't want to get along, I don't have to force myself to talk. And I thought, that's right. So that's why I've been ignoring you. Is that so bad? That's her reason for ignoring me? Katie is bad enough, but her friends sound just as bad. Hey, don't talk like that. I've been doing the housework every day instead of you, after all. What? Are you talking back to me? In the first place, I never did housework at my parents' house because we had a maid. If you're gonna complain that much, why don't you earn enough to hire a maid yourself? You're cheeky for a guy whose only redeeming feature is his looks. I've reached my limit. If it was just me, I might have been able to endure it, but I can't stay silent when she insults my eldest son as well. If she's gonna go that far, so be it. She's sorely mistaken if she thinks she can keep acting like a spoiled princess forever. Well, fine, you don't want to talk to me, right? Then please leave this house. I said this firmly to Katie. Upon hearing that, Katie, the eldest son's wife, couldn't resist retorting. Excuse me? What's with that attitude? Here I've been living with you reluctantly, and now just because I ignored you a bit, you tell me to leave the house? Don't you think that's a bit presumptuous? Ignored a bit? Where do you get off? Plus, you're gonna continue ignoring me, right? I can't live with someone like that. I couldn't back down either. I can't see a future where things get better living with Katie, and I think I'll go crazy from all the stress. As Katie and I were arguing, Brandon, the eldest son, stepped in. Both of you, please stop. We're family. Let's try to get along.
Really? You're still talking like that after seeing this situation? Your mom just told me to leave the house. And yet, you still take her side? I can't believe this.
Katie was freaking out, grabbing Brandon by the collar and yelling at him. No, after all, this whole situation is because of your attitude. That's what I thought in my head, but it seemed like Brandon felt the same way. I've kept quiet until now, but you're out of line.
Out of line? What do you mean out of line? Speak up. You're always so meek and can't say anything to me.
Hearing Katie's statement, Brandon seemed completely enraged. With a face angrier than I've ever seen, he said to Katie,
"Don't think everything will go your way. Don't underestimate me. You ignore my mom just because you don't like her? Are you a child or what?"
I didn't know that he could speak in such a tone, even though we've lived together for many years. Seeing Brandon scolding her in such a Yakuza-like tone, I couldn't help but be impressed, even in this situation.
Child? Did you just call me a child? Yeah, worse than a child. After exploiting your parent-in-law, you ignore her? Mom was right. If you don't want to talk and you don't like it here, then leave.
Brandon made himself very clear.
Fine. I get it. I should leave, right? I'll gladly leave this house.
Katie seemed defiant as well. She said she would leave the house. Does this mean they both just declared divorce? As I was thinking about this, Brandon took a piece of paper out of the bag he uses for work. Here.
If you're gonna leave, then sign this. What is this, a divorce paper?
Your attitude has been bothering me for a while. Using your wealthy family background to do whatever you want, never going out with me but always going out with your friends. I even thought maybe you have another man.
I can't believe you thought that way. I don't need a man like you.
After saying that, Katie signed the divorce paper and thrust it back at Brandon.
Here. Are you happy now? Make sure you submit this. And of course, I'll be taking my share of the assets. I'm going to ask my father to get a lawyer, so you better be prepared.
Saying this, Katie stormed out of the house.
Brandon, are you sure it's okay to accuse her of cheating without any proof?
Yeah, it's fine. Just watch. You'll understand soon enough. Well, if Brandon says so. For me, I felt refreshed that Katie had left our house. After that, life went back to peaceful times, just Brandon and me living together like old times. Half a year passed since Katie left. And one day the doorbell rang repeatedly, waking me up from my nap. Who is it now, ruining my nice nap? I checked the monitor while feeling grumpy, and was shocked. Why is she here? The drowsiness was completely gone. On the monitor was Katie. Katie. What's happened to you?
Madison. Please help me.
She just barges in all of a sudden, asking for help. What on earth is going on? Even if you ask for help. We're not related anymore, are we? I tried to send her away coldly, but my eldest son's wife, Katie, wouldn't leave at all. On the contrary, she started banging on the front door and screaming to be let in. Wait a minute. It's like I'm being made out to be the bad guy here. Thinking that I might end up calling the police if I left her alone, I reluctantly decided to let her in. What on earth is going on that you're this desperate? Well, actually, Katie, different from before, seemed willing to answer my question honestly. But there was something off in her response, like she was holding back. Was she really in that much of a tough situation? After I divorced Brandon, this arrived at my parents' house. What? What is this? Inside the brown envelope she handed me were photos proving Katie's infidelity and a demand for a settlement. The worst part is that my dad received this, and he told me I'm disowned and kicked me out of the house. I have nowhere to go. I'm thinking of apologizing to Brandon, but I can't get in touch with him at all. So, you just decided to show up today? Yes. Gosh. She's utterly foolish. She gets herself kicked out because of her own actions, and then she has the gall to come to her ex-husband's family's house. I'm too appalled to even speak.
Please! Can't you tell Brandon from your side that it was all a misunderstanding?
Kneeling down, Katie pleaded with me. I've heard enough. Really? Thank you so much. Katie must have misunderstood, thinking she was forgiven. She raised her face, her eyes shining. It's clear to me now that you're a complete idiot.
Huh? Why should I cover for you, when my own son was cheated on? And getting kicked out of your house is just desserts, isn't it? Am I wrong?
Well, that's true, but if you understand that, then why on earth did you come here? I really can't comprehend her actions. Besides, you didn't like me, right? You kept ignoring me, right? And yet, you come to me for help. You must be out of your mind. But you're the only one I can turn to. Just like Brandon said, she's completely taking people for granted. Why should I, someone she's been hostile towards, easily agree to help her? That's not true. You could have asked your relatives for help. Besides, your family is wealthy, right? You've always solved your problems with money. The settlement they're asking for is only $10,000, you could easily pay it off.
But I've already told you, I've been disowned and they won't help me financially anymore.
Katie suddenly changed her tone and yelled at me. There's no point in talking to her any longer.
Then deal with it yourself. Besides, we're no longer related, why should I help you? Don't keep saying nonsensical things.
I ended up yelling back at Katie. She was taken aback and fell silent.
If you're done, can you please leave? I don't want to see your face anymore.
I grabbed Katie's arm and forcibly led her to the front door. She apologized, crying, saying I'm sorry, but it was already too late. I'm not that generous of a person.
That's it between you and me. If you come barging in here again, I'll say there's a suspicious person and turn you into the police.
Saying this, I threw Katie, my eldest son's wife, out of the house and locked the front door. She was banging on the door and screaming for a while, but it became quiet in less than 10 minutes. Suddenly, looking outside from the living room, I saw the back of Katie as she walked away, shoulders slumped. Maybe if she hadn't ignored me for such a silly reason back then, this might not have happened. But still, I can't help but feel sorry for my eldest son. To be married to such a foolish woman, and to think she even cheated on him. She lived her life looking down on others, thinking she was always right. This is her punishment. She better reflect well and live the rest of her life in a better way. That's what I thought as I closed the living room curtains. It's been 3 months since Katie suddenly showed up, but she hasn't been back since. She must have given up. Come to think of it, I wonder what happened to the alimony for my eldest son. Suddenly curious, I decided to ask my eldest son about what Katie is up to now. By the way, have you been in touch with Katie recently? No, I haven't talked to her directly, but we've communicated through lawyers. Did you get the alimony all right? Yeah. Katie's dad said he was sorry, and he paid the whole amount at once. He even tried to give me an extra $20,000, saying it was out of goodwill, but I declined. Accepting that would somehow make my anger towards Katie fade. I see. So he's still angry. Well, that's understandable. So, is Katie living at her parents' house? No, it doesn't seem like it. According to her lawyer, she got kicked out of her parents' house, and now she's living in a cheap apartment. And get this, she, who never worked a day in her life, is earning her living expenses by cleaning at a bingo hall. She used to look down on cleaning, saying it's something maids should do. Serves her right. My eldest son said, laughing. To make my kind-hearted son say something like this, Katie must have really done something terrible. In a way, I'm impressed with her. I just hope that until the day my son remarries, we can live peacefully, just the two of us. Hey, you feeling all right? Well, whatever. I'm just winging it here. Ever since then, I haven't been able to react at all whenever I see Tom. I'm home. Huh? Where's dinner? I wonder, the shadow seems to be talking to me. But I can't make out what it's saying. Hey. Both of you, say something to Mom, will ya? No way. You know, we really don't need a dad in this house. My name is Jessica Thompson, a 40-year-old mother of two. My husband, Tom, is 2 years older, and we got married when I was 25. We were colleagues at the same company, him being my senior. We started dating about a year after I joined the company, got married when I found out I was pregnant, and I became a stay-at-home mom at Tom's request. He said, "I'll earn enough, so all you need to do is take care of the house." Back then, I found those words very reassuring. Then our son, Mark, was born, and 2 years later our daughter, Emily, came along. From that point on, my days were filled with housework and parenting. That was partly because I didn't have any reliable family or in-laws nearby. Both my parents' house and my in-laws' house were more than an hour away by plane. Since I moved to New York for college, even though my mom came to help when I gave birth, it was impossible for her to stay for a long time. Looking back, I should have gone back to my parents' house for childbirth. But back then, Tom's wish for me to protect our home had deeply rooted itself inside me. My mom always told me to come back home if things ever got too tough. But I, at the time, was unaware of this and turned her down. Now, Tom is a sales manager at a mid-sized trading company. And this year, with Emily entering junior high, I've started working part-time. Tom suddenly started saying this to me. You know, I've been thinking. It's probably better if Mark goes to a private high school, don't you think? As for me, I was fine with whatever he preferred, be it public or private. Actually, where I grew up, public schools were the only option, so I didn't really understand the difference. But it seemed like Tom had a different perspective. You might not be aware of this, but in the corporate world, the university you graduate from creates significant cliques. You can't really get into a good university if you go to a public high school. Private is definitely the way to go. I wish he would have told me all of this when Mark was entering middle school. This is ridiculous. If I really want to go somewhere, I'll look up a good prep school myself. And with that, Mark starts searching on the computer, showing me various local prep schools, summer programs, and winter courses. Emily, being a brother's girl, watches from behind and asks him to let her know if he finds anything good. Sadly, my kids are better at gathering information than I am. So as a parent, the least I can do is not get in the way of their future plans. That's why, to contribute even a little to the tuition, I started working part-time, not just relying on Tom's income. But when I brought this up, Tom just said, "Well, if that's what you want, let him do as he please. You just want him to get into a good school. That's about all a parent can do, isn't it?" And that was all he had to say. He's right, of course. But every time he said that, I couldn't help but feel a bit abandoned. Maybe it's because I barely spend any time with Tom. Since Emily was born, the intimate side of our marriage has completely vanished. Of course, it might have been because I was always busy and exhausted from childcare. Tom did say to me, "If it's too hard, you should hire someone to help." I appreciated those words. But they also made me push myself too hard to handle everything on my own. I even collapsed from exhaustion once. That's when I finally broke down and called my mom, crying. She panicked and flew in to help, staying with me and the kids for a while. I even told her about Tom's suggestion to hire a babysitter. If he's saying that, you should take him up on it once in a while. You've always been like this, trying to do everything by yourself until you're completely overwhelmed. Saying this, my mom stroked my head as I lay there, and I felt both comforted and pathetic at the same time. Yes, I always wanted to handle everything Tom asked of me on my own. And at night, I would be so exhausted that I'd just fall asleep. Before I knew it, we had become a couple in name only. And by the time I realized that this might not be good for our marriage, so much time had passed that I had lost count of the years. Sure, there were times when I thought, why won't he help me? Why doesn't he play with the kids once in a while? But then another part of me would immediately counter that thought. He's working hard so that I can always be with the kids. I'm really grateful for that. So, I have to do my part properly. Even if it means living a life full of miscommunications. One day, Emily held her laundry in her hands and announced, I'm gonna start doing my laundry from today. Is that okay? She asked, even though she hadn't really helped out around the house before. That was surprising, and I said, well, that's a nice offer and I appreciate it, but what brought this on? You have been really busy lately. No, wait, that's not it. You see, Mom, I don't like washing my clothes with Dad's. Now that I think about it, this girl has always been sensitive to even slight changes in scent, often making such comments. Dad's laundry has a weird smell. I don't want it to rub off on my clothes. You don't put any scent on your clothes, Mom, which is good. Please don't. At that time, I just thought she was talking about the hair products he always uses. And now she's in puberty. I've often heard that daughters start to dislike their father's belongings around this age. But the story didn't end there. Mom, I need to talk to you. When I came back from my part-time job, Mark was waiting for me. His extremely serious expression told me this wasn't a trivial matter. While we moved to the living room, taking off my jacket, I asked, "What's up? It's unusual for you to come to me with such a serious look on your face." "Yeah, it's about Dad," I gasped. As we sat facing each other on the living room couch, Mark then said, "Hey, Mom. How much do you know?" "About what?" Mark sighed lightly. "Right, I should have known. What do you want to say?" "Listen, Mom, calm down and hear me out. Emily came to me saying that Dad is having an affair." "An affair?" I never thought I'd hear such a word from the mouth of my 15-year-old. "You really haven't noticed, have you? From your reaction just now. But, Dad is a workaholic." "Mom, please, you need to face reality. No matter how much of a workaholic Dad is, why haven't we ever had a single family vacation all together? Is his company really that terrible? But your dad is a director now, he's busy." "Yeah, now. But he was a manager before. And you know what, we have families like that in my class too. The parents are so busy they hardly ever see their kids, but at least they take them on overseas vacations in the summer to make up for it." "What about us?" Mark added on. I fell silent. Now that he mentions it, that's true. I, and only I, take the two of them to my parents' and my in-laws' homes out in the countryside for major holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas. Since it's a plane ride away, we also take the opportunity to travel around various places. There are a decent number of tourist spots as well. So, I thought that was good enough. No, maybe I was trying to convince myself that it was good enough. I always thought Dad was irresponsible. Irresponsible? He's the one supporting our livelihood. That's a parent's obligation, isn't it? What Emily and I are trying to say is whether Dad is actually interested in you or us. I felt as if I had been struck by lightning. So, it's finally been said out loud. And Emily, she first hated the smell of Dad's laundry. Then she realized it smelled like women's perfume. When? She hangs out with her friends on her days off, right? Even if she doesn't buy it, she'd at least check out the perfume testers, right? She noticed that the scent from Dad's laundry mostly smelled like women's perfume. Emily is sensitive to smells and remembered that. And, I have something to apologize to you for. What? I skipped cram school a few times and tried following Dad. What? You did that late at night? I apologized in advance because I thought Emily might try to do it if I left her alone. And you know, Dad isn't working crazy late hours. He doesn't leave exactly on time, but he left the office around 7 p.m. and there was a woman with him. They went straight to the downtown area together. I didn't have the guts to follow them any further on my own. Of course not. I exclaimed. Yeah, so that's all I can tell you. I'll apologize to you, Mom. I shook my head vigorously. You're not the one to blame here. But what comes next is a matter for adults. Yeah. But remember this, Emily and I are on your side, Mom. Actually, we haven't talked about it since then. But honestly, I had a sneaking suspicion myself. I just didn't want to admit it. So I pretended not to see. I believed that was the way to protect our family. But it was the children who couldn't take it anymore. This is not right. I can't keep making the kids feel bad because of my stubbornness. I made up my mind and hired a detective agency. It cost more than I expected. But I think it was worth pouring my part-time job earnings into it. The result was as bad as it gets. As I looked through the evidence sent by the detective agency, I felt something inside me snap. What have I been maintaining this family for, and for whom? We didn't have time together now, but I thought someday Tom and I could enjoy our time together as a couple. Mom? How long had I been zoning out? I had taken a day off from my part-time job to look at the documents. Until the kids came home, I couldn't do anything. This is not right. I tried to hide the evidence from my sight by covering it. Why? I want to know too. That's not something for kids to see. Come on, I'm already 15. It doesn't matter. All right. Yes, this is absolutely not allowed. But what should I do from now on? I can't seem to settle my feelings. While I was thinking, Tom came back. Startled, I hid the envelope with the evidence in the kitchen cabinet. I'm home. When I saw him entering the room, I couldn't help but utter, huh? What is this? That's what I thought. Surely, that's Tom. My husband. But on the other hand, it's not right. It's not my husband. No, this thing is not even human to begin with. Then what is it? These thoughts whirled in my head, and my mind came to a conclusion. Oh, I see. This is something that shouldn't exist now. Hey, you feeling okay? Whatever, just do as you please. Ever since that moment, I couldn't react at all whenever I saw Tom. His figure gradually became blurrier, and he appeared nothing more than a vague shadow. So, most of what happened afterwards, I heard from Mark and Emily. Unconsciously, I started avoiding Tom's laundry in the basket. I was only preparing meals for 3, and it didn't become a big deal right away. After all, Tom rarely came home early. But one day, while the 3 of us were having dinner. I'm home. Huh? Where's my dinner? Hey you two, say something to Mom for me. No way. Why do we have to speak up for Mom to you? That was what Mark responded. Look, we don't need a dad in this house. Then Emily took out her smartphone and started to make a call. Hello, Grandma? It's Emily. He's here, so please come quickly. I wondered why Emily was contacting my mother. I heard voices saying, stop it, and it's too late now. I was just watching the situation as if it was someone else's problem. After about 10 minutes, my parents arrived, bringing another man with them. Emily indeed called our grandma, my mom. But they arrived so quickly? What's going on? Mom, what happened? Ah, Jessica. You've become so frail. My mom hugged me tightly. My dad approached the kids, put his arms around their shoulders, and patted them gently. Grandpa. There, you've done well. We'll take care of everything from here, so go to your rooms. No, I want to say what I have to say to Dad, who pushed Mom to this point, with my own mouth. He pushed me to this point? Hey, Mom. Do you realize what state you're in right now? We had to call Grandpa and Grandma. We told them Mom's broken. Broken? What does that mean? Look, Dad. Mom doesn't think of you as her husband anymore. Huh? Hey Mark, what the hell are you talking about? Hey, Jessica? My dad gently asked me. How many servings did you make for dinner today? What are you talking about? There are 3 of us, so I made dinner for 3. Oh, but Dad, haven't you eaten yet? That's terrible, I need to make something right away. I started to get up, but my mom held me back. That's not it, Jessica. We've already eaten. Don't worry about it. We're just here to talk to him. To him? I looked in the direction my mom was pointing. A blurry, gray shadow was swaying back and forth. The kids sent this to us. What? My dad was fluttering an unfamiliar envelope in front of me. A detective agency. Oh, so you've forgotten that too. My mom's lament sounded painful. But I couldn't understand why she looked like she was about to cry. That over there is your husband, Tom. What? The shadow stopped moving. What do you mean, Jessica? The shadow seemed to be saying something to me. But even though the words reached my ears, they didn't make any sense in my mind.
That's what I've been saying. It's your fault that Mom's broken. She can't even recognize you. What? You've got to be kidding. Hey, Jessica. You know who I am, right? Hey?
I felt a sudden grip on my collar, as if the shadow had grabbed me. But still, it was as if the words were coming from a distant place, and I couldn't understand what was being said. That's not gonna work, Dad. Take a good look into Mom's eyes. Let go of Jessica's hand, Tom. My dad pulled me away from the shadows. Then, both of my parents started furiously shouting towards the shadows. Mom, you might not understand what I'm saying right now, but... Mark actually grabbed both of my hands and looked straight into my eyes. We noticed that something was off with you, Mom, so we contacted Grandpa and Grandma. My behavior? Yeah, Mom. It's like you can't see Dad, because you can't stand the fact that this guy is cheating on you. That's not true. Mark, your dad has already passed away, you know. What? Such an absurd voice came from the shadows. Seeing my expression at that moment, Mark seemed like he was about to cry. You understand now, don't you, Dad? That's what's happening. The shadow slowly sank into the ground. During that time, Emily seemed to have prepared a tablet and connected it somewhere. Grandpa, can you see us? Oh, are you okay now, Emily? The voice was my father-in-law's. Grandpa, we are ready. Oh, Mr. Thompson, it's been a while. Same here, Mr. Smith. I really wanted to head your way and meet up, but unfortunately, my wife took ill. I'm so sorry to hear that. Your wife was very fond of Tom. She was indeed overly devoted to our son. Hey, Tom. A voice loud enough to crackle came from the tablet. What is it, Dad? I've got your share of the evidence copied over here. It must have been a shock for Jessica.
Dad, even you. Enough, it's been years since you visited us for the holidays. The only reason I haven't said anything is because Jessica always defended you. I never asked her to do that. Still talking back? Your mother was always troubled, not being able to refrain from complaining to Jessica about you not coming home. She knew she shouldn't have said those things, but couldn't help expressing her regret. And yet, you couldn't come because of that? Want me to read out the documents? Mr. Thompson, could we handle that part here, please? Of course, let's take a good look at how our son reacts to this. Well, let me say this. You've been in an unmistakably close relationship with your coworker, Marie Young, for 10 years, causing rumors around the office. Since you kept telling Jessica to stay home as much as possible, she hardly talked to her old colleagues, while you were having quite a time cheating. You even went on overseas vacations in the summer, not showing your face here for the holidays in these 10 years. And Ms. Young believes you two will get married. She started dating you when she was 25, and now she's already 35. She's at fault too. But when it comes down to it, she's ready to pay alimony in case of your divorce. And what about you? You've wasted the best 10 years of her life for marriage. Whoa, I didn't get that part of the story over here. So it has come to that, huh? Hey, Tom. There seemed to be a slight tremble in the shadow. Tom,
Just sign the divorce papers that Mr. Smith's lawyer has prepared right away. And as for driving Jessica to this point, you and Ms. Young are going to pay damages. Don't even think about skimping.
Dad, please, I'm begging you. Help me out.
I refuse. Listen, Tom, the moment we went through those documents, your mother collapsed and has been hospitalized ever since. Whose fault do you think that is? Mom is. I'd like to give you a piece of my mind right now. You've been cheating for 10 years, how dare you show your face and say that to me? Your mother is in her hospital bed, crying every day, regretting how she brought you up.
But, Dad, you're my parent, shouldn't you be helping me?
At your age, most people are starting to think about taking care of their parents, and here you are, talking like a spoiled brat. Don't worry, we won't be a burden to you. We are cutting ties with you. That's just. Oh, and by the way, it's a good thing you are an only child. The inheritance we were going to leave you, we will give it all to Mark and Emily.
Dad, please don't say that, help me out.
Enough. I'm hanging up now. Mr. Smith, I leave the rest to you. Ms. Young is at fault, but she seems to be more deceived by this guy than anything. But I'll leave that to your discretion. Do whatever you see fit with the two of them. Very well. We'll handle this thoroughly. And don't worry, we won't cause any physical harm. The image and sound from the tablet cut off. Now, let's discuss the divorce. The man who came with her seemed to be a lawyer. Making his way to the front. So, Jessica, you wish to proceed with the divorce? A divorce? We are a family of 3. Yes, but we need you to officially sign here to proceed. Right. Even if the husband is gone, I guess I still need to file the paperwork. Gone? That's when I truly realized, sorting out my thoughts later, that I actually believed he was gone at that moment. My husband was gone, and he was no longer here. I couldn't pinpoint when it happened, but as time went by, in my mind, Tom's affairs and constant absence were replaced with the idea that he had died. That's why, even though he was right in front of me, I couldn't perceive him as a living person, he was just a vague shadow. Of course, this became clear after receiving counseling later on. So, even though there were contradictions in the fact that I was able to live this life, I couldn't notice them. All I kept thinking was that I wanted to protect the life I had with my 2 children, Mark and Emily. That was all. As for not calling Ms. Young to this meeting, it was a decision made after discussions between my parents and my in-laws. Showing the kids their father's affair partner in the flesh was just too much. Especially for Emily. So, Ms. Young had a one-on-one conversation with a lawyer. It seems like she had made up her mind because she apologized repeatedly. I didn't think it was okay. Even if he kept saying we would get married someday, 10 years is just too long. Still, I was clinging on to a sliver of hope. And she also talked about my odd state. I was constantly told by him that his wife was cold, but I didn't think it was true. Apparently, he had always told her that I was a cold woman who always excluded him from the family. I changed from feeling sympathy for him to falling in love with him, but now I see, I was just being deceived. Her voice was trembling with anger at that moment. Mr. Lawyer, I will definitely pay the compensation to his wife. On top of that, I have a request. I want to sue him for marriage fraud. Is it possible? Do you have any evidence? I recorded his words just in case a time like this would come. What about getting married to him after he divorces his wife? I've completely woken up after this incident. I'm going to break up with him. Even though she is referred to as a veteran clerk in the office, it seems she is a very skilled worker. The evidence was properly collected and organized. It seems that because she loved him, she couldn't help but hate him intensely. In the end, Tom had turned even the woman he thought was on his side against him. Later on, both of them ended up resigning from the company. However, the circumstances were slightly different. Their relationship had spread to a certain extent within the company. It just hadn't been made public. That's why it was a big deal when Ms. Young exposed that she was suing Tom. What the hell, you're doing such a thing? I've been meeting with you because you were always saying that your wife was cold to you and you couldn't divorce her. So what? You came along for the summer vacation trip, didn't you? It was you who came crying to me, saying that your wife told you not to come. I was surprised. Hearing about the state your wife was in. She thoroughly exposed everything to the people around, and then Ms. Young resigned voluntarily. The compensation from her to me was paid in a lump sum. It was accompanied by a short letter saying, "I apologize." Tom eventually had to resign as well. An employee who causes a lawsuit is not needed, that's what it came down to. The compensation for me and child support for the kids was temporarily covered by my in-laws, and the rest would be squeezed out from his personal savings and the sale of the property, as well as from his monthly income. But considering his age and the fact that he was in a managerial position, I wonder what kind of job he can get now. Well, it's none of my business, but I started to receive treatment at the hospital immediately after driving Tom into a corner. Half of it was for examinations and the other half was for counseling. Since it was determined that there was no disruption to my life aside from the issues with Tom, I decided to move back to my parents' house with my kids. I'm sorry for making you change schools at a time like this. It's okay. It's about time for entering high school anyway. I would have been separated from my friends either way. I'm a bit sad about being away from my friends. But it's much better than living with that man. I really want to cherish my kids who say such things. I'm still continuing with counseling. Just not having the root cause of the problem there is a big relief. I'm thinking about going back to work full-time once I get a little better. For the kids and for myself. You might be wondering what's going on, but please listen closely. Get out of here immediately. A doctor I had never spoken to before stopped me as I came to the hospital accompanying my mother. His face was filled with urgency as he pointed in a certain direction. I was shocked by what I saw there, feeling utter despair and astonishment. My name is Amy Parker. I'll be turning 37 this year and I'm still single. Right now, I'm living at my folks' place and working from home without ever leaving the house. When people hear this, they often say, "You're still living with your folks at your age," but I have my reasons. My mother, Susan, suffers from an illness that's affected her legs, making her life quite challenging. She's been in a wheelchair for over a decade. Because of her condition, I left my regular job and took on freelance work as an illustrator, which I can do from home. I take care of my mother while living at our family home and work from there to cover both our living expenses. I don't even have colleagues, let alone a lover. I often feel lonely about my surroundings. Fortunately, my work as an illustrator is well received and I get plenty of orders. However, as I go through them indifferently, I always feel this lingering emptiness. It seems like all my close friends from school days are living fulfilling lives, getting married, and having kids. Looking at the shining photos of my friends would often hurt, so I deleted social media apps a long time ago. When we do meet up after a long time, my friends are always talking about their husbands or their kids. Not being married and without kids, living just with my mother, I felt somewhat inferior. Whenever I'd get in touch with a friend, they'd ask, "What have you been up to?" I grew tired of that question and stopped positively contacting them. Over time, our connections faded, and now hardly anyone reaches out to me. It's completely my fault. It's not that I didn't want to break free from this situation and lead a better life. But ever since I lost my dad when I was little, it was only my mother who took care of me all by herself. Considering her struggle, I felt it was my duty as her only daughter to be there for her. I kept telling myself that she had no one but me, and I had pretty much given up on a typical happy life. But then, one day, something unexpected happened, and my life started to change. I've always been told I have a serious personality. Born between a hardworking father and a flashy, fun-loving mother, I was their only child. My father passed away in an accident before I started kindergarten. My mother had been a stay-at-home mom until then, but took on the role of breadwinner afterward. That said, my father's life insurance paid out a significant amount, so she never really had to work outside. When I started elementary school, she remarried. She often mentioned how tough it was to raise me alone, and by that time, I think she had exhausted the life insurance money. My mother's new husband was a kind man, even though we weren't related by blood. He genuinely cared for me, and I grew fond of my stepfather and spent a lot of time playing with him. But it seems like my mom and I were just destined for hardships. The kind stepfather who came into my life fell ill and passed away. My stepfather is still in his 40s. The grief was unbearable and I resented the fate that made me lose a father twice in my life. Following his death, we received his life insurance, and I used that money to graduate from a junior college. After graduating from community college, my mother was against me leaving home. Living in the city will be tough for you. Life ain't as sweet as you think. She'd say that over and over, trying to persuade me. But I was determined to move to the city. I wanted to become independent quickly to lessen her burden. I couldn't understand why she couldn't see that, and I even grew angry at her for constantly holding on to me. In the end, I compromised and gave up on going to New York. Instead, I started living on my own in Chicago, which was relatively close to my family home. I secured a job at a major sports goods company and started my own life without my mother's help. Living on my own for the first time had its challenges, but there were even more enjoyable moments. I found a lover, and my life seemed fulfilled, both personally and professionally. My lover at the time had a job that required frequent transfers, and my mother didn't like that, always saying, "You'd be better off breaking up sooner rather than later. Do you really want a life where you're constantly tossed around after marriage?" she'd say, almost like a threat. Even though I understood her concerns, I felt that I should decide my life path on my own. Despite her repeated warnings, I was discussing marriage with my lover, and it was when she suddenly called me out of the blue. "Actually, I've been diagnosed with a serious illness. It seems like I'm done for. The doctor said there's no cure."
"You got to be kidding me!"
I exclaimed in shock and quickly decided to rush to see my mother. I don't remember when my real dad passed away because I was too young, but losing my stepfather was truly heartbreaking. Now, fearing the loss of my mother, I couldn't even stay calm while waiting for my return train. I grabbed just the essentials and hurried back to my family home in a rush. At that time, I was 27. When I visited the hospital, the doctor told me, "Your mother can't walk anymore due to disability in her legs." When I asked what happened, I was told it was some rare, unexplained disease, and I felt overwhelmed. "I'm gonna need to live in a wheelchair from now on. I don't have a husband. I'm sure I won't be able to make it without you, Amy." I didn't know what to say when she told me that. I have a job and I've promised to marry my lover, and now I'm suddenly being asked to come home. I immediately contacted my lover and decided to put our marriage plans on hold for a bit. Thankfully, my lover, understanding the situation with my mother, "Stay with your mom and support her." I talked to my workplace about her situation and took a leave of absence to return home and start taking care of her, who now lives in a wheelchair. In the beginning, she was quite humble. However, as time went on, she began to subtly interfere with my relationship with my lover. "Maybe I should head back to Chicago for a bit. I'll be right back. Maybe I can ask the helper to come by tomorrow?" I can't neglect my boyfriend, so when I suggested this, my mother vehemently refused. "My body hurts so much. While I can't walk and have no joys left, you're the only one having a good time." Her words, cutting deep into one's guilt, hurt my heart. This is how my mother always pleaded with me not to go back to Chicago. "As long as I have Amy by my side, I'm happy," she'd say. Over and over, she would whisper these words, trying to keep me close. When I discussed returning to work after my leave of absence, my company initially offered telecommuting. But if I continued to only work remotely, it became uncomfortable at the office. In the end, I couldn't return, and I resigned after a year of leave. I had asked my lover to wait for a year, then two, but with my mother's situation, we couldn't see each other often. With fewer chances to see each other, I felt his affection for me fading away. Though I had mentally prepared myself deep down, he eventually told me he'd found someone else and we had to break up. During the time I was back home caring for my mother, he had fallen in love with a woman he met at work. He didn't want to cheat, so he planned to officially break up with me before pursuing her. As a parting shot, he said, "I really did intend to marry you," and I was left speechless. I cried all night, thinking how anything could be so cruel. All men are selfish. It's always the women who are left hurt. That's why it's not Amy's fault. Mom, if it's this painful, I never want to fall in love again. My mother compassionately comforted me in my heartbreak. Love and marriage aren't the only paths to happiness for a woman, you know? Even without a man by my side, I'm happy because I have you, my daughter. She mentioned she had remarried once for my sake, not because she wanted another man in her life. Hearing those words, I truly realized just how precious my mother is to me, more than anyone else in the world. I've come to believe that I can't really trust anyone else. As long as she has me, my mother often says she's content, even with her mobility issues, she's always hopeful about life. I decided to give up on the idea of marriage and went back to my forte, working as an illustrator. Given the care my mother required, I opted for a flexible freelance career. From the start, my illustrations were well received, and jobs poured in. Soon, I was earning more than enough to support us, and I felt truly relieved. I hardly ever left home, living a secluded life with just my mother. And like that, 10 years flew by, and before I knew it, I was 37 years old. Lately, I've been feeling off. I wonder what's wrong. Well, Amy, you're not as young as you used to be. Maybe it's just age catching up? Approaching my 40s, I've started to notice more health issues recently. I contemplate seeing a hospital with my mother every day. But one way or another, I've avoided doctors and just tried to get by with over-the-counter meds. Just as mother said, I'm not young anymore. Many of my friends are deep into raising their kids, and I sometimes feel guilty for not having the same responsibilities. I haven't talked to anyone about this. Then, one day, my mother handed me a supplement she claims works wonders. You always take care of me, work, and manage the house. I wish I could be of some help to Amy too. Mom, thank you for everything you do for me. My mother seemed to always think of me and kept searching for well-reviewed supplements and health food products. The pills and capsules she handed me had an unfamiliar company name on them, but I wasn't particularly knowledgeable about them either. After starting to take them as mother suggested, I felt as if my health was improving. Though, every once in a while, I'd suffer from stomachaches or dizziness, feelings I hadn't experienced before. When I started taking them, I was told that some side effects are common, so I continued as mother advised. She said she was taking the same pills, so I figured they must be okay. With an unfounded confidence, I blamed my persistent poor health on aging and kept working. If I didn't have some struggles, people might think I have it easy in life. It was unbearable thinking that way, so I tried to convince myself that it was cooler to be seen as someone who endured hardships. At that time, I might have been intoxicated with the idea of single-handedly taking care of my mother. One day, I accompanied her regular checkup at the Central Hospital. Dr. Thompson was a kind-hearted physician who had been treating my mother since she first fell ill. This illness is tough to recover from, but we'll treat it to ensure it doesn't get worse. We hope for your continued support for many more years. While listening to Dr. Thompson, my mother had a big smile on her face the entire time. It was almost as if not getting better was a good thing. She'd be down after hearing it's not improving, so why could she smile? I shook my head, thinking to myself, that can't be right, my mother is a good person, and dismissed the fleeting thought. She probably was just happy to see Dr. Thompson, whom she'd been close with. It had been a 10-year relationship with Dr. Thompson. Both my mother and I trusted him very much. I felt the need to use the restroom, so after excusing myself, I left her side. When she goes to the examination room, there's always a nurse to look after her, so I'm not worried. As I came out of the restroom, I was suddenly addressed from behind. "Excuse me, are you Amy Parker?" a man asked, and I was taken aback. The man behind me was a doctor I had occasionally seen in the hospital but never spoken to. He introduced himself as Dr. Johnson and held out his hand before me. "I wanted to discuss something with you, Ms. Parker." If it's about my mother, I've already heard everything from Dr. Thompson. Dr. Johnson shook his head and said something quite unexpected. What I want to talk about is not about your mother, but about you. I was a bit taken aback by his intense tone, but I thought I might as well hear him out. He led me to a prep room with a view of the examination waiting area from its window. Dr. Johnson said with a serious face, "I know this might seem sudden, but please hear me out. You need to get out of here, now." Confused by what was being said, I blinked in surprise. Dr. Johnson was pointing to the examination waiting area outside the window. There, I could see my mother in her examination gown. "If you don't leave right now, I can't guarantee your safety. You should leave home and hide somewhere, anywhere."
What are you talking about? Don't say such things. And what's happened to my mother?
I couldn't just accept such a sudden declaration. Feeling frightened by his bizarre words in this isolated space, I tried to leave the room. But Dr. Johnson stopped me, saying, "Just watch." Then, something unbelievable unfolded before my eyes. I exclaimed, "What the? You saw that, didn't you? I'm genuinely worried about you. Because I'm not your primary doctor, there are things I can see and understand."
But why would something like this happen?
I couldn't tear my gaze away from the glass window. A mixture of shock and anger surged through me, making my head spin. Must have been my blood pressure skyrocketing in the heat of the moment. I felt dizzy and almost collapsed right there. Dr. Johnson caught me and laid me down on a nearby examination bed. "It's strange, I've been feeling off for a while now. I've been taking the supplements my mother recommended every day." As I said this, holding my head with my hand, Dr. Johnson's face contorted as if he had realized something.
That might be something quite dangerous. To put it bluntly, it might not be just supplements, it might be harming your health. Why? They're all from my mother.
Dr. Johnson replied in a soft voice, "That's why it's dangerous." I was taken aback, but deep down, I had always felt something was off. The realization now made me break out in a cold sweat. I had always suspected those supplements were shady. But I took them only because my mother had recommended them.
Could it be she's now targeting your health?
Why would she target me? Faced with the scene before me, everything I once believed in now seemed terrifying. It felt like everything I had faith in was collapsing. "You need to get out of here now. Call me when you're safe," the doctor instructed, and I bolted out of the room without looking back. What I saw was clear as day. My mother was in the waiting room, smiling at the nurse who was pushing her wheelchair. "I'm feeling great today." The nurse replied with a smile, "It'd be great if you could start physical therapy soon." When the nurse left the room to prepare something, my mother looked around furtively and then stood up.
Pretending to be a patient forever is such a hassle. Wheelchairs are just inconvenient.
As she muttered to herself, she walked away from the wheelchair and stretched big time. That wasn't the movement of someone diagnosed with a leg problem. After Dr. Johnson's warning, I headed straight home. What was Mother thinking, deceiving me for 10 years? I wanted to believe it was some kind of mistake, but even after that, she was still wandering around the examination preparation room. If everything up to now was just an act, I can't possibly forgive her. Driven by anger, I packed my stuff and stormed out of the house. I boarded a train heading back to the town I used to live in. Throughout the journey, I kept getting constant calls from Mother, who had realized I was gone, but I ignored them all. I kept replaying the conversation I just had with Dr. Johnson in my head. From that room's window, Mother looked perfectly healthy. She walked around with no issues, and the moment she noticed someone was coming, she sat in a wheelchair and exaggeratedly stroked her leg. To my shock, Dr. Johnson said something horrifying. "I can't say for certain without checking the supplements and health food products your mother has been giving you, but there might be ingredients in them that are making you ill." After asking about my recent health issues and when I started taking the supplements, he looked deeply concerned.
"That's crazy. Why would Mother do such a thing?"
"Perhaps Mother got tired of pretending to be sick and now wants to make you ill. You're young, and the disability benefits would be high." When asked if anything unusual had happened around me, my hands began to shake. That's right, Mother and I had lost close family members in the past. One was my biological father and the other was Mother's second husband. Both died from illnesses, and each time, a substantial insurance payout was received by our household. Dr. Johnson's words were a shock to me, who had wanted to believe in Mother. Desperate, I sought refuge with a friend I was close with at my previous job. It was our first meeting in roughly 10 years, but I couldn't care less about that now.
What's gotten into you all of a sudden? Please, I can't go home for some reasons. I need a place to stay for a while.
I pleaded with my friend, and she let me stay at her place for a while. I promised to find a new place during that time, and she probably sensed something was up with me. You can stay until you've got a solid plan for your new life, she said. While staying in my friend's room, I took some time to calm down and finally answered a call from my mother. Even after several days since I left home, the constant calls were unnerving. On the phone, of course, Mother was furious.
Amy, what's the meaning of this? Why did you suddenly leave me? My leg hurts and it's been tough for me.
No matter how much she yelled, I responded coldly with, really. Not liking my attitude, Mother scolded me sternly.
You call yourself my daughter? After all I've done for you, is this how you repay me?
Looking back, my biological father and stepfather took better care of me than Mother ever did. My mother has always been wild, often going out at night, leaving me alone most of the time. Both my real father and stepfather loved me dearly but passed away too soon. Mother always said she cared for me, but she stood in the way of my happiness. Her words didn't make sense. Spending time with my friend made me realize how twisted my relationship with her was. I retort sharply. I snapped back, did your foot hurt? Weren't you walking just fine in the examination room on your own? She probably didn't expect me to know about that day. Mother is silent for a while, then after a few seconds, she speaks in a flustered tone.
What? What are you talking about? You must have confused me with someone else.
And then she started again, I can't live without Amy, sobbing to get her point across. But no matter how much she scolds me for being an ungrateful daughter, my resolve won't waver anymore. It's no use lying anymore. And those weird supplements and health food products you've been giving me, I gave them to Dr. Johnson. He's analyzing their ingredients now. The moment she realized I wasn't buying her story, Mother went hysterical. She ranted and raved, hurling insults, and shrieked at me in a piercing voice.
Who's this Dr. Johnson?
Amy, he's fooling you.
Haven't we always been close?
Mother always tries to push her own narrative without considering my feelings. It was the same when she opposed my marriage. Even when she manipulated me into giving up my job and my lover, she never once considered my opinion. She never once tried to listen to my opinion. Now I feel embarrassed that I believed I only had my mother. Why did I ever trust her? My mother was always all talk and neglected me. She was always chasing after men, parading around town in her flashy outfits. Maybe it's because she got sick and became vulnerable. Or maybe when she couldn't find a man to fool around with anymore, she kept me, her daughter, close by. It wasn't out of love, but because she was jealous of my happiness. She probably always tried to tie me down by her side, making sure her property didn't escape.
You can't survive without me, can you? Dumped by men, unable to hold down a decent job, and at your age, you surely can't find happiness. Shut up! It's all your fault things turned out this way. Don't pretend to be a caring mother and talk about my happiness. Faking illness to scam disability and welfare benefits? It's shocking, almost criminal.
I raised my voice and hung up the phone. There are a few more things to settle before I completely cut ties with Mother. A few days later, I received a call from the hospital on my smartphone. It was from Dr. Johnson. About that issue, we've finally figured it out. Please come to the hospital immediately. I jumped on the train and headed to the hospital where Dr. Johnson was waiting. In the examination room, Dr. Johnson began gravely. Amy, as we suspected, those supplements were harmful to your health. You were close to being bedridden or confined to a wheelchair. I want to go public with what my mother did to me and sue her. Is there any way I can? Dr. Johnson slowly nodded in response to my determined words. I'll testify too. There might be other doctors or nurses in the hospital willing to testify as well. Before I could feel relieved, the door behind me was suddenly flung open.
Stop filling my daughter's head with nonsense.
The anguished voice was that of my mother, who was in a wheelchair. Pushing her was Dr. Thompson. Yes, why didn't Dr. Thompson notice that mother's legs were healed? As her primary doctor, he surely should have seen through her act. Mother continued to scream hysterically at Dr. Johnson. I ignored it and turned to Dr. Thompson. Doctor, what's the current state of my mother's legs? As always, Dr. Thompson replied with a calm smile. Well, nothing's changed. Your mother has been battling her illness for 10 years. Why are you, her daughter, blaming such a hardworking woman like her? The moment he heard that, Dr. Johnson looked terrified. Turns out, Dr. Johnson had always held Dr. Thompson in high regard. He had been working hard, following in the footsteps of him as a doctor. But one day, I noticed that Dr. Thompson's words and actions were becoming increasingly erratic. It seemed only Dr. Johnson had noticed this change, and it appeared he hadn't talked about it with anyone else. Dr. Thompson should know that Parker can walk. Dr. Thompson exaggeratedly spread his arms, acting like a movie actor. His gesture felt mocking, and it irked me. No, everyone's got it wrong. Only I am right. Parker's illness is severe, and his legs aren't healed. I'm gonna cure this mysterious illness. He then looked down at my mother with a stern face and spat out. After all the warnings not to walk, you went and did whatever you pleased. My mother pouted like a little girl, speaking in a playful tone. Well, I got tired of pretending to be sick. I wanted to switch with Amy quickly. At this, the pleasant expression on Dr. Thompson's face crumbled, and he began hurling harsh words at her.
You've got a severe illness. I'm gonna cure you, and then present it at conferences. I'll become a renowned professor. I'm gonna use you to gain all the fame. Just shut up and listen to me.
Dr. Johnson and I trembled before Dr. Thompson, who seemed consumed by his own power. Although Dr. Thompson and my mother were in cahoots, the doctor's behavior was clearly off. Even when she was yelled at, my mother didn't seem bothered and continued to voice her complaints to Dr. Thompson. You should have used something stronger than the medicine that shows symptoms slowly when mixed with supplements and health food products. Because you went about it in such a roundabout way, you got caught. Hearing this, Dr. Thompson's face turned beet red in anger. Before I could react to the shocking truth, Dr. Thompson's enraged shouts echoed throughout the examination room.
You don't know nothing, you silly woman. Dumb people like you, with nothing in their heads but luring men, don't get to tell me what to do.
But the very next moment, Dr. Thompson, probably due to high blood pressure, suddenly staggered and collapsed right there. Dr. Johnson calmly called a nurse over and began treating Dr. Thompson. Throughout this, I didn't exchange a single word with Mother, just bottling up my resentment and anger. To get straight to the point, my mother's legs had been healed for years. However, Dr. Thompson, who wanted to present it as a mysterious and rare disease at medical conferences, never let her get out of her wheelchair. Thinking of the disability benefits she'd get, she nonchalantly went along with it. But, naturally, playing sick for over a decade got old. She then tried to give me some shady pills, aiming to use me as her stand-in. Dr. Thompson was on board with this to an extent, but it seems he never intended to actually let my mother out of her wheelchair. He was going to keep her bound until the right moment for him to present his paper. Mother ended up dealing with the police due to disability benefit fraud. There are also suspicions that she may have murdered my biological father and stepfather for insurance money, and further investigations are underway. The police did visit Dr. Thompson, but he has been unconscious since his collapse. My mother still tries all kinds of things to get me to come to her, but I never listen. No matter how much she pleads, or how much she tries to win me over, I've decided in my heart never to go back to her. I don't want anything to do with someone who sees her daughter as a mere tool for convenience. I was saved from danger by Dr. Johnson, and because of that, we are currently dating. We're talking about hopefully getting married next year.